This is Link to the Cast, your weekly dose of video games and nerd culture ephemera, available everywhere good podcasts are sold. I am this week's party host. I am the platforming prodigy. I am Mark Robinson. I am Mark Robinson 2024. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and all that good jazz. I hope you had a wonderful time with your family and friends. We're not quite into the new season of Link to the Cast yet. We will have our season premiere sort of later on this month. So we have a couple of weeks to chill out, bring on some special guests, just, you know, take it easy, to be kind of a free-flowing sort of format. I do have with me, though, as always, Mr. Consistency, Mr. Chelsea. He is England's finest. He is Jack Lazell. It's a low bar, but I appreciate it you anyway nonetheless, Jack. How are you?
Yeah, thanks very much, mate. I don't know if I want to go out there and be known as England's finest. I think if I had that on a business card, assumptions would be made about the sort of content of my general character. So I'm just happy with any of the other nicknames that you give me. How are you doing, mate, anyways?
I'm pretty good. I took, a couple of weeks off over Christmas from all the kind of game making activities, but I jumped into the sea on day one of the new year, which was lovely.
So you finally took my advice when I've been telling you to get in the sea all these years.
Yeah. Portmarnock Beach, lovely beach in the north of Dublin, pretty chill. Some onlookers were wondering what the fuck I was up to because it was fairly cold that day.
And you were naked as usual. Yep. And but then I treated myself to the 6th best steak in the world, according to whatever steak review publication there is, at the FX Buckley in Dublin, or the restaurant itself is called the Bull and Castle, and it's a damn fine bit of steak. So started off the year very well, and then the last sort of 10 days or so, just really diving back into making the game, kind of getting the ball rolling with that. Is there a Michelin star style rating system for steakhouses?
I don't know, because I looked at the website that has the rankings, and it wasn't any more or less than here are the top 10 albums of the year. There was no kind of star rating or anything. It was just this is a real fucking good bit of steak. Obviously, slightly more elaborated upon than that. But I'm guessing there's probably some sort of official star rating, Dave Meltzer style somewhere, but I don't know. Anyway, as I mentioned, we have a very, very special guest this week, joining us in the month that we are now rechristening as Seanuary, as we will have Sean McGee on for next week's annual Game of the Year burial. He is Sean Shaunson. Sean, thank you very much for coming on and spending a bit of quality time with us. How are you? How was your Christmas and New Year's?
I am doing pretty great. Thanks for having me on, lads. It's great to be here with Mark and England's finest. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, I'm so glad that caught on so quickly.
No, it's good. As soon as I heard it, I was like, "That's sticking." Jack is England's finest forevermore.
Fair enough.
I'm doing pretty good. I'm having a really good 2024 so far. A really great Seanuary, as we've now christened it, which I'm very happy to be a part of. Very happy.
I kind of feel like that's like running Sean Connery's whole name together.
It sounds very. It's like it's if you say Sean Connery a bit too fast.
Yeah,
that's what you end up with.
I'm going to be Seanuary or just Seanuary. What are we thinking as a Sean? You are the king maker on this opinion.
Oh, I think you could go either way. I'm maybe a fan of keeping the U-ary in there, because I feel like that's the punctuation of January,
Yeah.
So Seanuary. But Seanuary sounds... Seanuary is like a sweet name for Sean Connery.
Yeah, or it's like your middle name, Seanuary Shaunson.
Seanuary Shaunson 2024.
Yeah,
Ireland's finest.
Ireland's finest.
Yeah, purveyor of the 5-star steak system. You got me nostalgic for FX Buckleys there. I've had many an FX Buckleys in my lifetime, and it is a fine cut of meat. I'll tell you that.
I like to think that I'm doing justice to living here by promoting all the good things about Ireland, which is their steaks.
You literally ticked it off: a good steak and a nice dip in Portmarnock Beach. That's all you need. That's about all we've got. That's literally the two things our country has.
You had Damien Duff as well.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Robbie King.
Shay Given.
Yeah, he was pretty good. Yeah,
Shay Given. Yeah, the lads.
Yeah, I mean that was a while ago now. Let's be honest.
The other Keen, all of them.
Yeah. For people out there who might not be aware of your work on the internet, give the not the plug. We'll do all that at the end, but let people know exactly what it is that you're known for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sean Shaunson. That's my channel name, and that's me. That's my name, I think. I'm not too sure. I basically spend my time on YouTube playing PlayStation 1 games or PlayStation games or PSX games, depending on how you prefer to call them. I kind of got caught up in it during the pandemic where I had very little to do. So I started making very long games. Long videos where I look at a whole bunch of games. And then I kind of just got sucked into finding all the weird hidden stuff on the PlayStation library, because it's got way too many games to even count. And some of them are some of the most bizarre and strange things you'd ever see. Some of them are also very bad, and some of them are also very good. So I spend as much time as possible trying to spread that out to the world, and people seem to enjoy it, so I keep doing it. And that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, there was the report that I've seen over the last couple of days or so about how there was, I don't know, like 14,000 games that came out on Steam last year, although, you know, the bulk of them are either porn games or asset flips, and they're not really, like, worth kind of thinking about. But I do think people forget that, probably because of things like the Saturn and the N64 having fairly small libraries in comparison, but that original PlayStation has, what was it, like over 5,000 games? Like, it's an obscene amount of games that were released overall.
Yeah, I think roughly about 4.5K in total across all regions. And it was just this crazy mixture of low licensing costs, being able to develop games with a small team, and then just a crazy amount of creativity from just entering into the 3D realm of games. It was a brand new thing for people, so everybody was just throwing whatever they could at the wall to see what would stick. And we all, of course, know, like, the classics. We know, like, the Metal Gears, the Final Fantasies, Crash Bandicoots, and things like that. But there's just so many weird, interesting, and unique little games that kind of fell through the cracks. And, once you kind of go into the rabbit hole of it, it's really hard to get out of it. If you like your games just strange and bizarre, it's the place to be.
Yeah, because the first question, like proper question I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned that you started this during the pandemic, but was there a concerted effort to go, like, for the PlayStation 1 specifically, or was that based on just, like, because I have to imagine you're probably around about the same age as us and grew up playing PlayStation. Was there just that's where kind of like the fond memories and nostalgia came from, that's what you picked specifically, or was it just you started with that and then it kind of felt like that was the way to go and just kept with it?
Yeah, pretty much. Initially, the idea wasn't really to kind of even, I suppose, like, create a channel and a brand and kind of plan things out in that sense. I just wanted to make a video to pass the time, see if I could do it. And the first video I made was a look at every Disney game that came out onto the PlayStation. And that was kind of driven by nostalgia. I had been watching a lot of other videos on YouTube that looked at a whole bunch of games on a particular platform. And whenever you think to yourself, oh, I hope somebody makes a video about a particular topic. In this case, no one had made that particular one. So I said, oh, cool, I'll just make it and we'll see how I get on. But through the process of making that one, which was just a nice little nostalgic look back, I immediately discovered kind of how vast and how large the PlayStation's library is. And even just by looking at some of the Disney games that only came out in Japan, I got introduced to, like, tons of weird little peripherals, strange offshoots of series that I'd seen before. And at that point, I kind of just, more so than even wanting to make videos, I just got really into researching the library of this console. And that, from there, kind of led to what the channel is today, which is just kind of this exploration of it, kind of like a guided series of videos that look at different games. But it was never really the plan, I wouldn't call myself, like, a PlayStation fanboy per se. I grew up with the console, but I'm very, platform agnostic, I guess you could say. I like all games from all eras, but it's just,
you're a rational, functional human being. Like, it's appreciated in this day and age.
Yeah, no, when you're an adult and you can afford to buy more than one console at a time, any sort of console war bias just should immediately leave your body. I imagine that's what happens to everybody. Somehow it has not.
No,
but yeah, no, I would do, if I had the time, I would do videos on every sort of topic, game, even beyond games and stuff. Initially, I wanted to do a Robot Wars channel, which would have been weird. But and I still might make a Robot Wars video someday. But yeah, it was really just, what do I feel like making at the time? And once I made that one PlayStation video, I just kind of have been sucked into it ever since.
Would the Robot Wars channel be like the Robot Wars games, or just the actual series?
Oh no, well, the plan, right, and if somebody wants to make this instead of me, that would be fine. It would be basically just a retrospective of the series. So like a very long video covering the entirety of each individual series of Robot Wars from the beginning until, I imagine, the new one. So the videos I'd imagine would be quite long, but they'd feature a bridge commentary of the fights and the backstage segments. I think it would probably be struck down by the BBC immediately. Oh, it sounds like a good idea. You know, like I'm sure you guys have watched, like you're wrestling fans, right?
Yeah.
So imagine like an OSW or something where, you know, here's a pay-per-view, but instead it's just a very long, here's the entire series across a long video.
I'm not gonna lie, I was first thinking you was gonna go like super eye patch wolf style and do like these kind of emotional arcs in the hero's journey of like
mine would be like, look at this guy crying, look at these weird nerds with the robots, you know, because Robot Wars is so funny. And it's watching some of like incredibly talented and smart people who are also have terrible social skills beyond the television. So it's top tier entertainment, you know. And there's about 9 seasons of that.
Is it Philippa Forrester? The
yes,
on there for
Philippa Forrester, the only name you've ever met.
But Craig Charles is also a massive favourite as a Red Dwarf fan. But
of course.
I just love the sort of like nerdy, sort of like really awkward dude standing next to like Philippa Forrester, who's like, you know, this beautiful like TV presenter lady grinning and smiling at them, asking them about their robot, and they're like,
I mean, it was kind of similar with like Scrap Heap Challenge, where they were all a bunch of nerds as well, but they were slightly more.
It's not the same as the Robot Wars.
It's not exactly the same.
They're like, well, I had a camshaft change after the first round, you know, it noticed caught the side of my robot, and thinking, you know, the flipping self-righting mechanism on there, and you know, and she's just standing there like with a big grin on her face, like, yeah. It's just
fun fact for Sean. So myself and Jack, we went to the same secondary school, but our secondary school actually had a robot in the first series of Robot Wars.
Oh, no way.
Which was called Bugs, which was this shitty little ladybird-looking thing that had no offensive capability whatsoever. And I pestered my DT teacher for like 2 or 3 years, like, look, can we get a robot back on? Can we do it? Can we get another robot on there? And he was like, yeah, you know, we might think about it, probably knowing that we've got no fucking budget to do this thing again. But that was our claim to fame. Other than Cliff Richard went to our school as well. That's nice. Our 2 kind of claims. So,
and David Bentley, you know.
And David Bentley, yes. Like, have you played the Robot Wars games? Because I actually did a stream probably about a year ago now, and I had Robot Wars Arena of Destruction for the PS2, but I didn't know that there were like handheld games for, I think it was the Game Boy Color or the Game Boy Advance, and you know, probably some of the worst games I've ever played were those handheld Robot Wars games.
Oh wow! I mean, I've only played Arena of Destruction as well. I believe there's another one
great,
called,
by the way. Anyway,
no, it's not great. There's another one called Extreme Destruction, which is on the Xbox, and I don't know if that is like a follow-up or just like an enhanced port of Arenas of Destruction. But I kind of from that point on figured out that BBC licensed games might not be the best. Do you ever remember that show Fightbox that they had on a little while later?
No, I don't know Fightbox.
Oh, it was like an AOR fighting thing where you would they get people in an arena and these little like hologram models would come up and start fighting each other, these little polygon models. It was absolutely terrible. And they made a game of that as well, and that game might even be worse than Arena of Destruction.
Now was Fightbox pre or post Rudebox by Robbie Williams? That's the important question.
It's actually maybe around the same time.
Yeah,
I think it's very close either way. I'm getting the feeling it's about a 2004, 2005.
That is very close to
Rudebox. I hate that I know both of these quite
well. I feel like Fightbox. It sounds like something that. It sounds like something that would have come along around about the same time as Nightmare, with like this kind of really basic rudimentary technology. Because you go back and watch Nightmare now, and it's like. As a child, I remember watching that and thinking this was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. And obviously you look at it now and you're like, well, you know, the green screen, it doesn't look as good. But as a child, you think, oh my God, fucking, this is like the thing to be on.
I think, like, even now when I watch back Nightmare, I still really like how Nightmare looked for what they were trying to do with the tech they had. Fightbox is kind of the same thing, but it's aged way, way worse than you could ever imagine. If you've never seen Fightbox, I'd recommend the home. Just go onto YouTube and look up an episode of Fightbox and just watch 5 minutes of it and weep.
And then watch the Rudebox video.
I would not
and then go listen to
Robbie
Williams' seminal album, Rudebox.
Now listen, Robbie Williams was very emotionally invested in Rudebox, Mark. Did you? They did a Robbie Williams Netflix documentary, which I watched, and seriously, it feels like his life and like the emotional trigger of him just like falling apart for a while and disappearing from public life was the failure of the song Rudebox.
Of course,
which he blamed on the press in the documentary, and I was like, for a man who's pretty self-aware, he still doesn't realise after all these years that Rudebox is so fucking awful. It just made me chuckle. I was like, he's completely bang on about every other element of his career. And it's like, yeah, but Rudebox though. And I'm like, no, Robbie, this isn't the one, mate.
And that is the first of what will be many wild tangents for the next hour or so, I imagine. So,
yeah, how do you? Well,
welcome,
we haven't
folks.
even asked Sean how he feels about Limp Bizkit yet. So
I love Limp Bizkit. I'm a Limp Bizkit diehard here. Don't worry. We all grew up around the same era. You know, I was in the peak.
We've all seen the My Way promo video. Like, come on now. Like,
I've seen the My Way promo video. I was there for the My Way promo video. I've seen Limp Bizkit live. One of the best live gigs I've ever been to.
Yeah,
unmatched energy. The crowd was so drunk, they didn't care who they hurt. It was amazing.
Me and Jack have seen Limp Bizkit together. It's we are bonded for life through this,
and we had an absolute blast, Sean.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. Important stuff has been spoken about now, Mark. So you can ask more.
I'm thrown off now. I can't remember what the hell my next question was going to be. I'm sure it was an important one.
Well,
Jack, you got one? You're in this as well.
Yeah. I guess I do. I did warn Sean pre us coming on here that your role was going to be to ask the cool questions about old video games and his channel, and I was just going to throw things in there like Rudebox. So you're really putting me on the spot. And
Go for it. You'll be surprised what I know. You'll be surprised what Robbie Williams and Limp Bizkit fans I can pull out.
So many things that I can pull out of my pop culture canon.
No, I'm gonna bring it back, drag it back, kicking and screaming to what we were originally about. Did you, like, prior to starting the channel, then, like, did you have prior experience with video editing? Is it something that you had always wanted to do, or is it just the pandemic is here? What the fuck do I do now for the next year or so? I guess I'll give this a go.
Yeah, I guess in terms of like experience and stuff, other than just messing about and making like fun little videos for my friends with Windows Movie Maker, that was about it. You know, I had a camera when I was younger, and I used to film as like skating and stuff around where we used to live, and I'd make just little videos in Movie Maker. And that is the grand total of the editing experience that I've had. When it came to doing this channel and whatnot, I had an idea in my head, right, that I've watched enough YouTube to know how to make a good YouTube video, or at least to how to make a good gaming video. And I felt that I knew enough about what I was talking about to at least, there's no point in me doing this if I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm not, like, at least somewhat educated on the topic to help, deliver it to other people.
Yeah.
But the rest of that was pretty much just winging it from the ground up. I didn't know if I was going to be good. I had the hope that I might be, and it turns out that if you've edited on Windows Movie Maker before, almost all modern editing suites are just a fancier version of that, and you only really need to know about like 5 or 6 commands to edit a video. The rest you can just go, oh, I wonder how you do that, and then you Google it, and then there's a video showing you how to do it. So you can
typically a very nice Indian man will go through a lovely little 5-minute tutorial with you, and
you'll get a lovely EDM 10-minute opening with the music blaring at you.
Yep.
Yeah, yep. Which is the classic.
You just drag videos onto a timeline and then star wipe into every transition. That's how it works, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I've avoided using the star wipe so far. I'm going to save it for a special occasion. But I learned then while editing that, if you don't know what you're doing, just keep it simple. You don't have to go too fancy with things. Nobody really cares that much. Or maybe they do. Maybe I have some big Star Wipe fans out there, so I'll implement them over time. But yeah,
when you hit like 100,000 subscribers or something, save it for a big occasion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The video's going to open with a Star Wipe, and that's the only Star Wipe that will ever be there. The one and only.
Perfect.
You've heard it here
Tremendous.
first.
Yep.
When you put your first video up, was it very much just like, all right, I guess I'm done, and I'll show this to a few friends and, just kind of see what happens? Like, how was the sort of first couple of months and first couple of videos in terms of, did you get like an immediate response? Did you find like, the videos were gaining any traction? Like, how did you have any plan about like what you wanted to do with these outside of just, I just want to do these as a kind of creative endeavor? I realised there was a couple of questions in one there, but
no, it's cool. All adjacent, all connected. It all works. At the time, I didn't really know what I wanted from it. I just know that I wanted to make a video, almost to prove to myself that I could do it. And I wanted to make sure that I put effort into it. And the longer I spent on it, because that first video was a little over 3 hours long, and it takes a long time to edit a 3-hour video at the best of times, especially when you're really just kind of piecing things together at first. And I remember like showing the video I sent it to one of my friends, and I showed it to my partner. And I remember watching it with her, and she's like, "So what do you think? Is that good?" She's like, "Yeah, it's pretty good." I thought to myself, I was like, sweet, it's pretty good. All right. Because I'd always thought she'd be the hardest one to, because if I'm going to be talking about old PlayStation games, which to be fair to her, she doesn't really care that much about. I was like, if I can impress her, I can impress anybody. So she said it was
star wipes is what she said though.
Oh yeah, that's it. She's like, needs more star wipes and a cat if possible, if you could throw that in there. So
have you thought about getting a mascot for your channel, Sean? Like
it'll just be me in a star wipe appearing
dressed as a cat.
Dressed as a cat. I think it'll be a big hit, legitimately. But I put the video out, and I was like, look, I've put so much effort into this, and it's pretty long. You know, surely some people are going to watch it, right? And some people are going to think it's cool. And then about a month passed by, and I think it barely got like 50 views whatsoever. I sent it to a few friends, and in fairness to my friends, right, lovely people, but I don't think they're really in the mood to watch a 3.5 hour video about Disney games. It's not for everybody, of course, you know. But I thought at the time, I was like, right, well, this is it. You know, I've made my video. It's up there. No one's going to watch it. And that's okay. I've made my peace with it. I had a fun time making it. I learned a lot. And then I just put everything away and went, right, I'm going to go back to whatever else I was doing in my life, which once again was during the pandemic, so not a whole lot was going on. And I immediately just got a bug to go back and do it again. I like thought about, 101 different topics that I'd like to talk about. And if I have the inspiration to make it, I was like, cool, I'll just go and make it. And I guess I caught like a bug for it at that stage. I didn't really care if people were actually going to watch them or not. I just liked the process of playing something, just kind of having a casual little talk about it, introducing it to whoever wants to watch, and then I'll just make another one until it stops being fun or I just lose the will to do it. But at some point, like maybe about a year after doing it, like videos would just slowly but surely increase in their views. Every now and then one would get recommended on Reddit or in a gaming board somewhere. And I guess they just kind of spread by word of mouth, Like if you go from having a video that gets under 100 views and then you're getting a video that gets about 1,000 views in a week, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a pretty big increase when you break down the numbers. Because, a lot of people on YouTube, they always say, imagine your video, if it's watched by 100 people, that's a lot of people. If it's watched by 1,000 people, that's a lot of people. And it is. And it's something that you should always kind of think about even when you're starting out. And yeah, it just kept going from there. And at some point it was like, right, even if I wanted to stop now, I'll have people giving out to me if I do. So I better just keep going. And yeah, I still love doing it to this day. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work, but it's gone better for me than I ever really could have hoped.
Do you prefer to talk about games that you think are rubbish or games that you think are good? That's why I always, like, whenever I see these kind of people that kind of go through games and review games, talk about games and kind of go on the journey a little bit, like, there's a lot of comedy value and a lot of entertainment you can get out of a really terrible game.
For sure.
And like, but, the actual enjoyment and like, putting all of the time in that you clearly do with the length of your videos and your edits and stuff that you do. Which one of those do you think you prefer to make?
It's a weird one. I think I have a lot of love for the videos that are about bad games. The process of maybe playing them isn't that great, but I think you get a lot of really interesting things to look at while playing them. And it could be from, how odd some of the design decisions are, or how, just funny some of these bad games can be. Because games can be just very funny at times when they're a bit wonky. But even if the process of playing them isn't that much fun, I love writing about them and I love kind of making videos about them. And I want to be always very careful when I talk about a bad game, because I can't make a video game, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time just telling someone who actually can make a video game how bad they are at it, when I don't think that at all. I think you can have a lot of fun and be kind of playful with bad games, whereas a good game, you'll have a lot of fun playing it, but I think you have to be a bit more direct and a bit more conscious about what you're saying to kind of really like deliver the goods that the game is offering. Because you can say something is good, but I think you have to be a bit more careful about explaining why it's good and why it's so important, or how it's influential in some way or another. Like when I played a lot of the Final Fantasy games, I was like, God, what do you even say about these? You know, everybody knows they're important. Everybody knows they're good.
Well, what can we say what hasn't already been said as well? You know, you can find 1,000 videos about Final Fantasy 7 online, you know?
Exactly.
Oh, you know, like, no one's ever listened to me talk about Final Fantasy 8, Mark. I can dig into the theories on that until you're blue in the face.
Please, no.
Yeah, Sean, do you like Final Fantasy 8? This is an important question for me to hear the answer to.
I do indeed. It's the first Final Fantasy game that I owned. So it's not the first one that I played, but it is the first one that I owned. And I, for whatever reason, like just didn't read the manual. I got completely lost and messed up my game the entire way through. And then I came back and got good at it a few years later. And it's a beautiful mess of a game.
Yeah.
That's
what I like about it. It's the imperfections. You know, it's the strange like story arcs and jumps. And, you know, I love that any RPG game where you can just break the system completely, you know, if you put enough effort in, that you can just completely break it and sort of bend it to your wills. I like systems like that. You know, I feel like in a lot of modern RPGs, they're really egalitarian in the sense that, you know, there might be some with job classes and stuff, but a lot of them, you know, they have this sort of advancement of grids and like really simple kind of things that all base off, in my opinion, what was kind of invented with Final Fantasy X Sphere Grid on the PS2. And now they're just, everything's like a simplified version of that. And that kind of sucks. For me, I like the idea of like getting into an old school RPG on a PlayStation, breaking the system early and then sort of like cruising through the game and then having fun doing it and playing it the way that you want to.
You've either like ruined the game before you started, or you're so overpowered that the whole thing's a breeze. It's beautiful. Either you have to, a game rewards you for learning its systems. Yeah. Which is why I think Final Fantasy VIII is special. And it's, you know, and if you don't understand them, you can also make life hell for you. It's the only game where leveling up makes the game harder.
Yeah, I know, exactly. That's the min-maxing thing.
I wanted to bring it back there because you were talking about, you know, good games and bad games and how you talk about bad games. And certainly with the video that you did about was it the worst rated games on the PlayStation, or like the I can't, there's specific dynamics of it, but the way that you approached that was very much like, all right, let's actually go in with not just to kind of throw the daggers at this, but let's really kind of like look at these and see where the failings are and you know, try and find the kind of good in them. And from my perspective, like, I am making a game at the moment, and I have kind of more consciously now when I play games, if I find a game I don't like, I do try and look at, all right, well, why is it that, instead of just like this is just crap, whatever, don't like it, why did it fail? What did it do wrong? What could it have done better? What does it have in there that, you know, like, is maybe something that's interesting that at least you can point to that and say, hey, here's a cool little thing. And like, you know, I was watching your Christmas episode, and you had like that Santa Claus Saves the World game, and it's like, look, this is just fundamentally a terrible game, but also it's being done by like a Lithuanian developer, and that's a really interesting factor about that. And it's like, okay, what does that team look like? What does that budget look like? What is the kind of scope that they have to work with? And if you have that kind of bit of the context to it, then it immediately becomes a really interesting game, where on the surface you look at it and it's like, oh, this is one of the worst platforms I've ever seen in my life. But having that kind of context to it, and it's certainly something where, you know, if I do play a game, and there's so many, like, you know, kind of small scale 2-team, 3-team indie games out there, and a lot of the time you can see where parts of the games have been stripped back, where like, okay, there isn't really any animation, or you can see where bits have been kind of like, we can't really do that because we just don't have the team. And certainly, again, for like the game that I'm making, there's no animation, there's no AI, because it's like, that is not what me and the programmer can really like do. Let's focus on the strengths. And so I think something that I do appreciate your video, and I think something that kind of warmed me to your channel very quickly, is that even if a game is bad, you're not going full on kind of angry gamer, video game nerd at it. You're like, hey, let's kind of look at this from sort of the bigger picture here. And like, was that kind of conscious effort to begin with, or is that just like the way that you've always looked at video games?
I guess it's something that I kind of developed over the years, you know, because like everybody, I enjoy a bit of the old gaming entertainment content where like a guy gets very angry over some very superfluous things for the joy of others. I think, but the issue that I took with it is that over the years, a lot of people just seem to have that reaction to everything just straight out the gate. You know, I've always found that when people talk very, I suppose, respectfully about video games, and I don't want to be like, oh, you have to be respectful about a video game, but if you listen to people who kind of really care and kind of think about these things and know about these things, and especially someone who's actually involved in making video games as well. Like I said before, I can't make a video game, but I always love hearing people who can make video games talk about how these different design decisions, you know, how they play out in their own mind, what do they pick up on games as well. And it kind of taught me to be just a bit more thoughtful with the games that I play. I find I get a lot out of them if I think about the design decisions, or, you know, how does this complement this aspect of the gameplay, or even if there is an issue that is there, you know, what would it take to maybe fix it, or what are the, you know, what could you compare it to, like maybe another game that tried a similar idea and maybe did it a bit better. I think every game has highs and lows and good things that they can learn from, and some are clearly, you know, like you could have like a Metal Gear Solid where it got so many groundbreaking things right in one go, and then you might have something like Santa Claus Saves the Earth, which is just, you know, a funny little game that was maybe made by a small group of people, and, you know, it's pretty basic, but I love some of the little things that they did with it, with like Disco Santa and all these other strange things. I think when I play a game, I'm not looking to just make fun of it. I think I like games and respect games a bit too much to do that. And maybe that's just how I think about them. So anything that I play, like I always want to have a good time with it. I'm not coming in to have a bad time, and I'm not coming in to, you know, make a video at a game's expense. I just want to basically show people what I think about it through the whole process of playing it. It's not really like a conscious thing. It's just how I view games, or how I've come to view games over the years.
Yeah, I think with me as well, specifically, something that I'm constantly thinking about is that, you know, in the mid-90s, yeah, the internet existed, but for me, for example, so the game that I'm making like a spiritual successor to Cooler World, which is, you know, a game that I love on the PlayStation. And right, Cooler World has the ice blocks in it. You roll across them and it keeps you rolling. And I was like, all right, I'm going to have something like that in mine. How do I make a shader in Unity that can make like an ice cube effect? I can go onto YouTube and I can find 10 videos quickly that gives me like 5 different ways of doing it. You didn't really have that in the 90s, and that kind of goes back to what I'm saying there again about like Santa Claus Saves the Earth. It's like, fundamentally it's a bad game, but, you know, they don't have the manual there that's like, you know, it's probably a custom engine, or maybe an engine they've ported from someone else, but there's no Unity, there's no Unreal, there's no asset store that they can go and grab things. It's all just like kind of doing it on the fly. And I've spoken about this a couple of times now. I'm reading the GoldenEye 007 book from the Boss Books series, a great series of books. And with them as well, and even more so, like they spent the first year or maybe a little bit more developing a game for a console that didn't exist yet. And it's like, they don't know what the console is, they don't know what the controller is going to look like. It's all just kind of being done on the fly, and yet they still made, you know, one of the kind of most prominent first-person shooters for the console ever. And I think that is probably more than anything else, the more that I get into making my game. And I don't know if this is something that you'll think about going forward now, but it's something that I'm always kind of thinking about. Like, anytime I play a game from the 90s, or even like the early 2000s, it's like, however bad this is, it's like, they have probably people they can ring up and ask for advice, but you can't just do a quick Google search and, you know, find a bit of code that helps you fix whatever. And it's just, there's like a black magic. There's a craft to it that I just can't even begin to comprehend, and they are like, just, I don't know, like superheroes for the kind of shit that they had to do in the 90s with the material that wasn't there to work with, you know?
Oh, it's crazy. And it was constantly changing and evolving so quickly all the time. Like, even if you look at the landscape in the space of like 10 years from like 1985 to 1995, everything, you know, escalated so quickly with graphics and tech and whatnot. I think it's just a very rare case of having just really, really talented people just carry and learn this knowledge over the years. And just some people made it big with the ideas, and other people were like Rare, where they just created something amazing almost straight out the gate. Like, Rare had such an amazing run on the N64, and they were pretty well respected on the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo Entertainment System prior to that. But it just shows you how, like, incredibly talented some people are. And there's a reason why a lot of these games are held in such reverence nowadays. Like, you could argue that they don't hold up gameplay wise to some of the stuff on later gens, but if I play Mario 64, I play GoldenEye, I'm still blown away by how much they got right so quickly. Like, it's, people always joke about like, oh, Mario 64 isn't really that groundbreaking. No, it is. No, it always
was at the time.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
It was at the time.
But it might not feel like it in 2024, but like if you're playing it for the first time now.
Like I'm playing Donkey Kong 64 at the moment, and that's a game that came out 4 years later, and it's astonishing, and it's a rare game, but it's astonishing how clunky that feels in comparison to Mario 64, which is 4 years earlier. And one of the big things that people always talk about, and I know you may kind of like reference to this as well, is the 3D Bubsy game, and how that came out very shortly, I think, after Mario 64, and obviously you look at them and they're night and day in how they look and how they feel and whatnot, but it's like it's the turn of the century that is 3D games. No one knows what the fuck they're doing. The fact that game came out at all in any kind of state is incredible. And there are 3D games that come out now that play just as badly, if not worse. So yeah, like the Mario 64. Anyone that thinks, I mean, unless they didn't, because I don't think Mario 64 is like a kind of rose-tinted glasses nostalgic thing. I think that game still holds up.
Oh yeah, it's real good.
You might look at it and think that it looks a bit rough and whatnot, but I don't know. I've been playing Mario Party 2 with my girlfriend at the moment.
Oh, the best Mario Party.
And
personal favorite.
You play any of the mini games in it, and you're like, this looks like Mario. It sounds like Mario. It doesn't fucking feel like Mario when I'm doing any of the kind of moving around like mini games at all. It's like this is, I should be able to do like a backflip or a running somersault, and I can't do anything, and this feels terrible. But Mario Party 2 is great.
Oh, it's great. I love the little outfits they dress up in. That's pretty much the main reason I prefer it out of all the Marios.
Cowboy Yoshi,
Boat Yoshi, Space Yoshi, all the Yoshis.
And crucially, you forget about Bowser and all these little gimmicks he's dressed up as. Black Hole Bowser is one of the characters of the 90s, yeah. Did you grow up playing PlayStation? Like, did you have a lot of time spent with PlayStation? Like, because I know we asked you already about, like, was it a conscious effort to do your channel based specifically on the PlayStation? But, like, did you grow up with that, or was you kind of fortunate enough to have, like, a bunch of consoles and that's the one you remember fondly, or was that like the only one you had? Because a lot of people only had the one or two consoles because that's what your parents were buying you for Christmas, and you were going to like it one way or the other.
Yeah, I was very much lucky to have a bunch of consoles growing up, but it was only purely through like me just constantly asking for new consoles. I think back in the day, if you were, most parents, you're like, oh, here's your games console. We get you games for this. We're not getting another one. You already have one. That kind of thing. But when I grew up, I initially had a Sega Mega Drive. And I think it was about 94 that I got mine. An uncle just was done with his or whichever. And he's like, cool, you can have this. So I got really into like Sonic the Hedgehog, all the old classic Sega games. And I was, from that point on, like a Sega kid. I think once you get infected with Sonic Tude in an early age, it's hard to shake it out of you. And I wanted a Sega Saturn just because I had Sonic on it, and I think my mom at the time, she was in a toy store or a game store, and they went up and she's like, oh, I'm thinking about getting the Sega Saturn for my son. And this was maybe about late 97, early 98, I'd say. And the guy at the store was just like, you don't want to get him a Saturn. That's like, no, there's no games coming out for it. Like, you want to get him a PlayStation.
Probably already announced the Dreamcast by that point as well.
Do you know what? You never met that guy. Think about how much he changed your life.
Oh, he's crazy. He done, like, I would probably be a diehard Saturn guy. Most diehard Saturn people had a Saturn. I think if you had a Saturn as a kid and then had like the N64 and the PlayStation kids making fun of you for not having games, I think you hold that bitterness in you forever.
They're holding that copy of Nights into Dreams, telling you it is a good game. It is a good game.
It is a good game. I really like Nights.
It's okay.
It's a whimsical little game. If you like your whimsy. Yeah. But that's how I ended up getting a PlayStation instead. And as I said before, I wasn't like platform agnostic. I was platform agnostic. I didn't really care. I just wanted to play Sonic, but realistically there wasn't that many Sonic games on the Saturn anyway. And I had just gotten Crash Bandicoot and Space Jam.
Not many good ones as well, at least, unless you wanted Sonic Jam or Sonic R.
or Sonic. Yeah, there you go. There's your two. But yeah, no, I just got the PlayStation from there, and that was kind of my main squeeze, as we'll say, for the longest of times. I did eventually get an N64, I think about 2000. I was very lucky. Well, I say lucky, my birthday and Christmas are quite close together, so I had a bit of leeway with getting consoles in that regard. If I asked hard enough, I might get a console. And I at least got an N64, and then I similarly fell in love with GoldenEye and Mario Kart and Mario 64 and Zelda. So it wasn't like the most, I was out here playing all these weird games. I played the regular old games just like anybody. And for most of my life, especially when you're a kid, you tend to just get the same games that everybody else gets. You get like your Tony Hawk when you move up to the later days. You're playing Halo on the Xbox with people. So I had a pretty, not super game heavy childhood, but it was, games kind of always revolved around it. If I was hanging out with friends, we would play games at someone else's house or things like that. So I was constantly in the gaming zone, but I don't think it became like super hardcore until years later.
But at that age, it's like staying and play games or go out and roam the streets, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and we loved roaming the streets back in the day. I don't really see gangs of youths roaming the streets as much anymore, which is probably for the best.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, so they're too busy on TikTok.
We had a fairly bad riot here a month ago, but we won't talk about that. Do you get like much time to play anything new? Because anyone who looks at your Twitter channel, Twitter feed, you're playing a lot of PlayStation 1 games. There's constantly screen grabs of look at this weird fucking thing from Japan, and it's kind of the case with people that kind of do this sort of content where it's like where do they find the time to play anything modern? And I'm just curious if you ever like find time for modern stuff at all.
I try my best to find time for modern stuff, but I won't lie to you, doing the YouTube, especially the kind of videos that I make, which are long by design, I'm not going to say, I make long videos, woe is me. I want to make those type of videos. But doing that really does very much limit the types of games I play nowadays. I used to play, League of Legends with some friends. I used to play MMOs, Final Fantasy 14 with some friends. I have a lot of people who are into like esporty stuff, Counter-Strike and whatnot. And I used to play them casually as well as just playing the odd new game that would come out every now and then. But, as someone who still works a regular old job and does YouTube and doesn't really have any, I suppose, aspirations to become a full-time YouTuber, because I don't really want to turn playing games that I like into a job. I feel like that might heavily affect how I do my videos, which I don't really want to worry about. It means I mostly just play PlayStation 1 games, which is a bit of a weird thing and a bit of a negative of doing this type of stuff, because I feel the most out of the loop with modern gaming that I probably ever have. But also I think a lot of aspects of modern gaming I just don't really vibe with, I guess you could say. Like there's a handful of games that come out each year that I might want to play, and even last year the stuff that I really wanted to get into, like a bit of Baldur's Gate or maybe Final Fantasy 16, they're pretty long, so I just don't play them. I just look at them and I go, that's too long, I won't probably get around to finishing that, or I'll play a bit of it and then go off and make a video, and then I'll come back and be like, well, I don't know what's going on, so I won't play that.
Are there any games that you would break that for? Is there anything that has either come out in the last couple of years or you see on the horizon where you're like, oh, it's a XYZ game, I have to play that?
Oh, I have a lot of time for Megami Tensei games and the Persona games, so I'm probably going to take a bit of time out to play the Persona 3 remake, which I think is out pretty soon, like in a couple of weeks. And then similarly, I usually from the FromSoft games, as well as I just played Armored Core there. I played a lot of Armored Core last year, but that's like an old fan favorite series of mine. It really does vary, but like if it's a short enough game, like a lot of games don't really run over 20 hours. I'll probably have time to fit them in there here and there. But yeah, it's mostly just the cool big ones, like the Nintendo stuff. I play like most of the Mario games that came out. But I was a big role-playing game guy, and I think those are the ones that have taken the hit the most. But Shin Megami Tensei, I would take a break for, no problem.
Have you seen or noticed, because it's something that I feel like I've noticed over the last 5-10 years or so, the kind of mainstream, the AAA industry has gone, there's that power scale that's gone up and up and up to what is seemingly being untenable heights. And the flip side of that is you're seeing the indie space where, and I've made this kind of point before on the podcast, where I think you've got this crossroads of a lot of people around about my age who played PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 games, who are finding that it's easier and easier to get into making video games. And I'm like, hey, here's this weird fucking thing that I liked when I was 13 that no one's making because either the AAA space just doesn't care about it, or the IP is owned by Embracer or whoever and is sitting in a vault somewhere and is never going to be seen again. Like, have you seen, like, there's a couple of games, there was a Signalis from last year, which had this very, you know, kind of PlayStation 1 style looking aesthetic. There's a game coming out called Crow Country, which is this kind of like Resident Evil, but kind of slapped onto an FF7 aesthetic with the models, that kind of stuff. Like, have you seen that yourself, or is that something that kind of interests you, and maybe like because of obviously what you're the content you're making, that's something you might look at in the future as like these games are coming more and more apparent where people are diving into, because we had like the sort of the pixel art style revival around the 2010s, and now it's like we're in the kind of PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 visual revival, which I think is a really like fun space. And even like the new Prince of Persia game, it's like a 2D Metroidvania, but it looks like a World of Warcraft game from 2004, like the art style and the character models. And I think there are parts of the industry that are kind of going back that way, and I'm wondering if that's something that you're going to keep an eye on, or if you've, you know, even kind of noticed or are interested in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, even before I started doing the PS1 stuff, I was well into, I think a lot of that PS1 or kind of the low poly aesthetic is very prevalent in horror games, especially. It's like, as you mentioned, Signalis and the upcoming Pro County. These are inspired by, you know, survival horror games from the PS1 era. And it's not strictly the PS1. Like, I know a lot of people say Alone in the Dark kind of was the forebearer of this stuff, but people, I think, associate it with the original Resident Evil and, you know, tank controls with that era too. And as you mentioned with AAA, the budgets are becoming insane. The amount of people who are needed to make these games is crazy. And even when I was playing, like I was playing Alan Wake 2 not too long ago, which is a really great game. But I was thinking to myself, like with these photorealistic environments, I was finding it very hard to even just kind of read a lot of the stuff that was around there. I was like looking for hidden items, and I was like, this looks too good. I can't actually see into this forest, this dark forest of things, to find like items that I'm looking for. And it kind of made me think about how all these older systems, the PlayStation 1, the PS2, that kind of generation, people really had to, because of the limitations that they were working for, they really had to make the most of just clever visual design and artistry to really make their world and their characters pop. It may not be the most technically advanced thing in the world, but people put a lot of effort into just making their games very stylistic in how they look. And Crow County is like a great one that you mentioned, because that's kind of the idea of doing a survival horror, but with the aesthetic of Final Fantasy VII, which is these lovely little cute low poly chibi models on pre-rendered backgrounds. And being able to do that, you know, you don't need a whole lot of people or a crazy budget to make something like that, but it's so aesthetically pleasing to me. And it kind of just reinforces the idea that, you know, it's not even about, well, we have better hardware, we have better technology, we need to make our games look better. These are just very legitimate style choices that I think hold up really well and are very appealing to people. And we see games like that and we probably get very nostalgic about it, and they think, oh, it reminds us of a simpler time. But I think, you know, when it comes to these styles, they're just very legitimate styles that I think people have really just grown to love and adore over the years. And that's why they're still prevalent today. And, you know, long may it reign. I every time I see a game that pays homage to an old classic or tries to take a new spin on an existing style, it's super exciting. Like, that to me is more exciting than most of the AAA stuff that comes out. Like, I don't want like a Suicide Squad looter shooter. I just want to.
I don't think anyone else does, to be quite honest, by the sounds of it.
9 years it took to make that, and it's just like, who wants this? You know, like you could just
Rocksteady.
One of the best developers we had. Rocksteady, my God, what happened? But yeah, to answer your question, I love seeing it, and you know, I adored. I haven't, Crow County isn't out yet, but I adored Signalis. That was one of my favorite games I played in 2022. So I can't more please.
Yeah. With like what you're doing now, with the channel, like, because you know, growing up, I didn't really think about the fact that we lived in a time then where you had like Japanese exclusives or North American exclusives, or hey, we even had exclusives here in Europe, mainly football games.
Chris Kamara Soccer, shout out.
Exactly. Like, have you found yourself wanting to kind of lean more? Because obviously with your channel, you have kind of different series that you're doing, and one of them is the kind of fan translations of Japanese games and whatnot, and just looking into Japanese games as a whole. Have you found that? How have you found the challenge of kind of looking into Japanese games? I presume that you don't speak Japanese or read Japanese, and like, how have you found the challenge of kind of diving into that particular part of the PlayStation back catalogue?
It can be pretty daunting. You kind of know from the get-go the types of games that you might want to avoid, which are mostly role-playing games, which are very text-heavy. Like, there's probably a lot of really interesting things that about those games, from, you know, music to visual elements, that you wouldn't really need to know Japanese to, you know, show off. But at the same time, I don't really want to be playing a game and boot it up and go, well, I can't speak this language, I can't really explain it to you. I'd rather do the game a proper service by understanding its systems, because there's so many little bits that if you don't understand about a particular game, you could just completely misrepresent what it is. But the thing with the PlayStation in particular, and kind of the region exclusivity for across the board, is that there's just so many little games that other people across the world might not know about. I'm very lucky to have viewers from, you know, South America, North America, and all across Europe. And every time I would look at like a North American game or a European game, you'd often get a lot of people who just haven't seen it before. And Japan, I think, is like the biggest bounty of them all, because I think there's roughly 2,400 PlayStation 1 games that only came out in Japan, which is a ludicrous number. And most people, like, I know a lot of them, but even knowing a lot of them is to know that I really know nothing about the scale of what's out there. And, you know, a lot of those games are readily playable without any knowledge of Japanese whatsoever. And as you mentioned with the fan translation stuff, there's so many really talented hackers and translators out there who are giving us maybe like on average nearly 10 to 20 Japanese games per year that weren't in English that are now available for us plebs to play just for free, you know? So it's like getting a brand new game for your system every year, and lots of them, and some of them are really, really good and really, really interesting as well. So it can be a bit difficult to try and present that to people, and I try to, I suppose, curate the list of games that I am going to talk about to at least kind of make sure that I can explain it properly and get people interested in them if I can. But it's something that I think about, but it is what it is.
Is everything you do done through emulation?
Yes. So initially, the plan was to do it through emulation until I could have the space to do it properly. But what happens is I now have all the equipment. I have, you know, all the classics. I have the capture cards, the RetroTink. I have like 2 PlayStation 2s on me on either side. I have a PlayStation around me. So I have all the equipment to capture stuff from real hardware. But with the PlayStation, emulation is so good and really, really quite accurate for the PlayStation in particular. And if you're doing these types of videos, especially when you're looking at a lot of games in one, and you might want to be able to use things like save states, not to progress through the game, but if you want to show off, like, let's just, like, old games are notorious for having like a really, really cool item that you can use once and it's gone forever. And I'm like, oh, cool, I want to show this off. Emulation allows you to show that off and then not have it actually affect the game that you're playing, so I can still play it like a normal person and not like a YouTuber, because you want to avoid playing games with the mind of a YouTuber. That's what I always say. Play it like a normal person. have your gameplay.
Plus, also,
legit.
If you're trying to find, you know, 10 like obscure Japanese games, A, you have to be able to find them, and then B, potentially you have to be able to afford them. And then both of those things can be quite problematic.
There are games that I've talked about where it would put me into bankruptcy if I bought one of them. I've sorted that out because the PlayStations that I have are like, they're kitted out, they're modded, so I can play burnt discs on them, which is probably the best way to do them. And then I also have
That's how we all did it in the 90s.
Exactly. And I have an SD card mod as well, so I can do them. There's usually like complications with playing burnt discs and whatnot, but, you know, if I feel the need to use real hardware, and to be fair, if I was going to move up to a different console, like, I think the only other console that I'd probably even like to talk about in the same vein as my other ones is the PS2, which is for the same reason. It has a ludicrous amount of games, but PS2 emulation isn't to the standard what I'd consider good enough to show off, so I'd have to move to full capture for that. But emulation just makes your life so much easier. And a lot of people care if you're using emulation or not, but most people do not care in the slightest. So don't worry about it.
Have you was you kind of like aware of emulation going into doing the channel? Like, is it something that you'd been using for the kind of years prior? Because like emulation for me is something that it's like, you know, I had Z-SNES back in like 2010 or whatever, and was fucking around a little bit with that for some, you know, playing Super Mario World and whatnot. But it was purely just I guess I'll see if I can do this. It wasn't something I was kind of really deep diving into. And then it's only over the last couple of years when I got like my first kind of retro handheld device, and then getting the Steam Deck and kind of really going full tilt into, okay, let's like, hey, I can get the Sega Model 3 like list of arcade games onto my Steam Deck.
Oh, it's
not easy, but it's like, I've gotten to the point now where it's like, I don't even want to play any of these games. I just want to see, can I get those things running on that, load them up, play them for 5 minutes to go, right, good job done, on to the next thing then.
Yeah. That's a classic trap to fall into. I call it the R4 card syndrome, which was the first time that I ever experienced having like any game I wanted available to me when I got my R4 card for the DS, and I loaded it up with so many games that I wasn't interested in playing the games. I was just interested in loading as many games into it as I could, playing a few minutes of them and then trying something new.
It's the Spotify syndrome. I open up Spotify and like, I don't know what the fuck I want to listen to.
Yeah.
That becomes the game though, doesn't it, at that point? Like, the game is, how many games can I get on here?
Oh, it's crazy. How many games can I get on it? Same with the Steam Deck. When I first got that and realized how great an emulation system it was, I had like, you know, all the fancy front loaders, all the cool videos playing, like without even playing a game, I'm like, look at all this cool information.
Which is also taking up a significant bulk of the memory on your SD card as well.
Oh, it's worth it. If they want to play a 30-second video of Panzer Dragoon before I hit the start button, I'll do it, you know. It's worth the space. But I'm still the kind of person who really loves physical media. Like I buy my music on CDs. I copy mixes that I like onto mini disc because I think it's just weird and cool.
Mini disc is so underrated as a format. I absolutely love that. It's
so good. I got like a little Sony like mini hi-fi, and it's like my favorite thing in the world. And even when it comes to games nowadays, in a weird way, doing these videos is maybe finish a lot more games than I normally would have. I'm not like wanting for something to play. A game gets put into the video for me to play, and I'll beat it. And you know, I feel a lot better coming out of that experience and playing a game. And most of the time when even I play a game for a video, if I don't own it, I'll probably pick it up at the end of it anyway, whether I like it or not. I feel like I just have this connection with the game now. I've beaten it. I've made a video about it. It's part of me now. It's part of me. I gotta have it in the house. But I feel that with emulation for sure. If you kind of get overwhelmed with choice, you might not play anything. And there's an aspect of physical collecting where I think that happens too. Like, if you could go to a CEX and buy like 100 PS2 games for about £100, but if you're not going to play them, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I'd say at least 500 at this point.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I'd rather just get one game, play it, and then just have that memory and have the knowledge of playing it, you know? I think that's more important. Sometimes you need to slow it down and just get back to basics. Even if a Steam Deck full of games is pretty sweet.
I think the dream for anyone like us is to be able to have that space to like really just be like, all right, physical media, because you know, I back in the day had 500-600 CDs, and I had to sell most of them when I moved over here. And I had, you know, pretty much all the consoles as well. I had to give those all up. And I had an inkling recently. For the first time, I listened to Nevermind by Nirvana on cassette tape. Someone had taken the cassette tape sound or feed, and it's available on YouTube. And like, you know, whenever I've listened to it recently, it's been the remastered version on Spotify. But listening to like the cassette tape version, it was like, oh, this is actually how I meant to listen to this fucking thing. And for a brief moment now, I was like, right, cassette tapes, this is it. All my favorite albums, we're doing it this way. I'm picking up a big boombox. And then immediately went, no, Mark, that's stupid. You don't have the money for that at the moment. Let's calm the fuck down. You're not 21 and have disposable income like you used to. But
yeah,
it's
also,
the dream.
Collecting them, would you like the official versions, or would you like just start taping all of your favorite music onto tape?
No, it would be the official version, because you want that sound. Like, you know, you get the vinyl of something. You want that particular kind of analog sound that you can't get elsewhere.
I have the second Archers of Loaf record on tape if you want that.
Oh, classic.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I'd take it.
The thing with tape is, luckily, not. This is the same with VHS. Not as many people want tape and VHS as, say, like vinyl. You can acquire so many tapes for next to nothing, and it's as you said. It's not even like, for me. It's not even so much about income, because you could get quite a lot of that for a pretty small price. It's space. I don't think a lot of people realize how small houses are in Ireland and the UK. Like my entire space for everything is just like a little box room, and I just stack up as much stuff as I like, and then everything else that I've ever had media wise I've probably gotten rid of at some point throughout the years. You know, like everybody wants to be that cool guy with the big game collection, rooms full of stuff, but it's not attainable for a lot of people. I would love a nice American basement that's prone to flooding. That's
all you need now is a Steam Deck and a 2 terabyte SD card, and you're good to go.
Oh, absolutely. You got the world in your pocket. I don't think. No, you could probably fit a Steam Deck into your pocket. It'd have to be like big, baggy, classic 2000s jeans.
We're talking like a Liam Gallagher style, like trench coat sort of thing.
That's in fashion now, though. The baggier, the better. So it's pure. It's prime Steam Deck weather for outfits.
Jack, you never got I know you have a Steam Deck, but you didn't quite go down the hole that was like, I need everything on my Steam Deck to play like at once, as far as I'm aware.
Oh no, I have a lot of things on my Steam Deck. I have like all the
once you had Burnout, you was good to go, right?
Here's the thing, right? I put maybe 15 or 20 PlayStation 1 and 15 or 20 PlayStation 2 games on there, and then just played Burnout 3. Unblinkingly, obsessively, like refinished the whole game again. And then like every now and then I'll dip back into like GBA games, or I think the only PlayStation 1 game that I've really played on there is the original Colin McRae Rally, because it was like one of the first games I ever got for my PlayStation 1. Like, I've really fun memories of like my mum was like, oh, me and your dad spent loads of money on this, so on Christmas Day, so I'm gonna have a go, and and then her just like crashing every 100 meters that she drove the car, and then like after 3 or 4 times that happening, putting the controller down going, have fun, sweetie, and I'm like, yeah. So like that's the only thing that I kind of like have a game like that in my memory banks for. But yeah, I just played a load of Burnout, and also SSX3 as well as a big thing for me.
I mean, that honestly though, like, this is the thing, you can just play those 2 games and you can have a wonderful experience, almost justify the Steam Deck alone. Like, for me, it was being able to play Metroid Prime on the toilet, and that was prior to the remaster coming out. But for me, being able to like do that, I was like, this is it, I've peaked. The gaming is never going to get better than this.
You can play Metroid Prime on the toilet in original and remastered version.
That's the crazy thing, yeah. That
life's complete.
People are like, life's pretty bad right now, and to be fair, it is. But don't forget that you can play Metroid Prime in the toilet 2 different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
We're moving forward.
Don't forget that you can order a McDonald's to your house now. I mean, come on now.
That's true.
Yeah, but it's just overpriced. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Still, you can do it.
The chips will be cold, but it's the price for progress.
You can do it, in fairness. Actually, you know what? I don't think I've ever ordered a McDonald's to my house that wasn't terrible.
It's one of those foods that has the shortest like shelf life, like good time. There's roughly about 10 minutes where McDonald's chips maintain their form.
The half-life of the McDonald's is like significantly worse than anything else.
Yeah, so
you should go order the right things.
You got to order the right things, and ideally you want to live as close to a McDonald's as possible.
Of course.
Yeah.
Ideally.
In which case you're like, why am I paying $1.99 Uber Eats fee to get this delivered?
Because I'm on the toilet playing Metroid Prime.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably because of all the McDonald's you've been ordering. That's
See, there you go. It's a cycle.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. That's why the world is bad.
Once again, drag this back. Are there any games that you have? Because I know you've done like episodes that were based on like a specific game. I was watching your Fear Effect video a couple of weeks ago, because like Fear Effect was one of those games I knew of it. I remember reading whichever PlayStation magazine at the time. It was Fear Effect 2 specifically, because that was one I'm like, oh, lesbians.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I'm just clipping that one bit of the podcast.
I'm sure you are.
It's completely accurate too. Ooh, lesbians. Yeah, that is Fear Effect too.
Come on now. But it was like one of those games that I never actually went and watched footage of. So like watching your video of it, and it's like a very kind of like detailed breakdown of like, this is how the game is. This is what you're doing from set 1 to set 2, blah, blah. Are there any other games that you're thinking about that you want to do with that? Either like ones that you, because I know if I remember, Fear Effect was a game that you hadn't played, and that was kind of, you went into that like, it's a game that I know of and I haven't played. Like, do you have other games that you want to do in that kind of format?
I'm not sure if I have other games that I want to do in that solid format. The weird thing is that I usually play a game and then almost immediately I realize that format might work for this type of game. Because even when I played Fear Effect, that wasn't necessarily to make a video of it. I just was like, oh, I've always been meaning to play this game. I had a lot of friends who were pretty high on it, and they'd always recommend it to me. And when you do like videos on the PlayStation, people will always be like, oh, the PlayStation, I remember that. Here's a game you should try. And somebody mentioned Fear Effect and I played it, and then just understanding what that game was, which is kind of like a combination of an FMV survival horror kind of tank control game, which is very bizarre to see in action. I played it and went, this is too cool not to talk about. And one of my favorite people on YouTube is a guy called, the channel is called The Cursed Farms, but the videos is videos that feature this style are called Ross's Game Dungeon, which is usually just playing a game from beginning to end in just kind of like an abridged way. And I really love the style that he used for those videos, which is just, we're just going to bring you through the game from start to finish, you know, a little bit of commentary, little parts about the game. And I thought it was really cool seeing someone do like, oh, it's kind of like the gap between a playthrough and a long play, but more of like an edited kind of review style. And for that kind of game, I was like, there's so many weird little parts of this. It would actually be kind of interesting to see them all flow from area to area. And the interesting thing about those types of videos is that even though they're quite long, they're probably the easiest ones to make and write about, because you just watch the footage back and you quite simply talk about what's happening and you explain it to people. And then maybe you add a little bit of flair, personality, if there's space to do so. So I definitely love to do that style of video for another game, but I don't necessarily know if I have a game in my head that I want to do it for. I think what would happen is I'd have to come across the game, or I'll just, like, surprisingly, I still play PS1 games on the regular just to unwind. You wouldn't think I would, but they're pretty easy to pick up and play, especially when you've got a Steam Deck next to the toilet. So I probably Fear Effect 2 is the only one, because I said at the end of that Fear Effect video, I will do a video on Fear Effect 2, but I was waiting for that remaster of Fear Effect, which got cancelled and then revived and then cancelled again. I guess it's not happening now, so I'll have to get around to doing it. But I actually played a bit of Fear Effect 2 in prep for that video, and like it's even more lesbian-y than you could think. It gets very bizarre, very weird, very quickly. But so keep an eye on that. I'm sure
there's a long play of it I can go and look at if I need to.
Oh yeah, I'd say so.
Not sure if I should though, or at least not when the girlfriend's in the room.
It's a weird one.
Yeah. Oh god, I had another question there, but it's gone. Jack, help me out here.
Go on, Jack. Hit me with a hard hitting
favorite
question.
sandwich. Come on, you doing it now? I know you got it there in the canister waiting.
No, I was gonna say, recently I've been replaying Grand Theft Auto 4, and it just like threw me back to the point of me being very young and playing those first GTA games, and then being absolutely horrified when they moved GTA 3 over to be like a 3D open world sandboxy style game. I'm like, how could they do this? I'm never going to play that. How dare they take away the top-down nature of this particular thing? So I was just wondering, from like, PS1 to like any future franchises, are there any franchises that you think just, they kind of peaked on the PS1, and the changes that you made to the game, they weren't revolutionary in the style of Grand Theft Auto, and you just don't think they've ever kind of reached that peak again since?
Funnily enough, I think there's quite a lot. I think you might be the only person who had that reaction to Grand Theft Auto 3. I legit think you might be the only person in the world who went, no.
Certainly because I can play OG Grand Theft Auto now, because that thing has not held up very well.
Yeah, I know, but I played my friend's version of Grand Theft Auto 3, and within about 5 minutes, I was like, oh, I was wrong then.
You're like, oh, they've really done something here. Gaming's about to change forever.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I guess that to answer your question, a lot of games kind of, in a weird way, kind of peaked on the PlayStation, and while they've tried to be, I suppose, improved on other platforms, they're just not as good as they used to be. Crash Bandicoot, I think, is an obvious one. Spyro as well. But that was a case of the original developers going, and then we're like, oh, we're going to try recreate what you guys did before, but with nicer graphics. And a lot of PlayStation 2 games have that, you know, our games look better, they're more technically impressive, but that's when you really begun to understand that it really is the people who make the game and the specific things about game feel and how things are designed that really matter and make a difference. So those were the ones that stood out to me as a kid. There's a lot of role-playing games that people didn't like the changes they made to them. There was a classic series called Breath of Fire, which had 2 pretty great entries on the PlayStation 1, and then they made one called Dragon's Quarter on the PS2, where they're like, we're going to try something new. It's now a dungeon crawler where you're locked in a mine and you have to keep going down through it. And people are like, nah, this isn't what it used to be. That happens to a lot of games. They try new things. I think in Japan especially, they love to really experiment and come up with new ideas and revolutionize their games. And a lot of people over here especially are generally not receptive to games changing a formula that works for them. You might remember Final Fantasy 7 to 8 and so and so. People are like, yeah, it's worse. They've changed a lot of things, you know? And
then they changed it right back again in Final Fantasy 9.
They changed it right back. Like, Grand Theft Auto is one of those just generational leaps where it's like, well, technically, if you think about what the games are, they're the same, but incredibly different. But it's still Grand Theft Auto, you know? But yeah, for me, it was just, I just wish Crash and Spyro didn't get worse, but it did.
Yeah, what would you do if like an upscale, you know, say like a current gen version of a Crash or a Spyro? Would you still kind of stick to the platformer format, or would you kind of do something completely different with the characters in a 3D space?
Well, I mean, in fairness, they did Crash 4, which pretty much kind of plays like...
Yeah, it was just a Crash game though, right? Wasn't it?
That was it, yeah. What happened is people went back to, you know, they did the remasters, that sold really well. They did the Spyro remasters, they also sold really well. And those were just, you know, the original games, the developers were different, but they tried to tune it as close to the original as possible, and they just made it really pretty. And I think that works, you know? And then Crash 4 was just, what if we take these original ideas and try to stick the gameplay being close, but also add new things? And in a weird way, I think, like, I do like Crash 4. I think it's very good, but I also think they might have overtuned it a little bit. All the ideas that they tried, I don't necessarily think worked. And they also made the game a bit too difficult. Like, some of it is like crazy difficult, and that might be to somebody's taste, but I think they went a bit extreme with how hard they made that game. They were like, oh, you know, all you Crash players are all adults now. You're ready for hard stuff. And it's like, yeah, I also feel like I'm really bad at this now. I feel like I suck.
Do you know one question that, like, kind of off the back of this, I think is an interesting one? Genuinely, like, I have a real kind of mixed feeling sometimes about remakes and remasters. I absolutely despise what they did with Final Fantasy VII, for instance. Now, like, you may well have really enjoyed it, and in which case I apologize for the severity of my opinion, but that has a very special place in my heart, and Tetsuya Nomura playing around with a storyline I wasn't particularly a fan of, right? I think Resident Evil 2 is the most absolutely nailed on the money sort of remake of anything so far I've seen from that PS1 era. And I don't know if you managed to play that remaster.
Oh, I did. I finished that. Oh god, I must have been in that game maybe like 7 or 8 times, and I wasn't even like a really like hardcore Resi fan. I enjoyed all the Resident Evil games, but I wouldn't consider myself a hardcore fan. 2 is like one of my favorite games of all time, the remake of 2.
So great.
It's just, this is the thing with remakes, right? And it's possibly the same reason why you don't like the Final Fantasy VII remake. They're effectively different games. Like Final Fantasy VII on the PS1 and, you know, Final Fantasy VII on the PS4, PS5 are like completely different games. It's the same story, same characters. Well, not the same story. They've clearly changed a few things, but I
with
kinda,
narrative ghosts, sure, narrative ghosts, literal narrative ghosts.
Oh, it's crazy. I love Nomura, the mad bastard. But like, I would consider them like separate games. You know, I enjoyed the remake for what it's worth, but you know, what the remake is, I don't think it like sullies or affects my opinion of the original too much. And I think Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2 Remake, I enjoy both of those as well. And obviously they tried to, you know, but I still consider Remake like a different game, because so much of it is the structure of it and how you control things is just very different. And I like adore what they went for. I think they took what worked in Resident Evil 2 and put all the good modern stuff into it, just made it this like beautiful, scary, creepy game. And the core stuff about Resident Evil that people really like, which is kind of the replayability of the game, where, you know, you play through it the first time and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, I'm scared, and then you get used to it, and then you start actually planning things and start thinking more about how to beat the game efficiently, how to, you know, take on harder difficulties. Like, it was after playing through Resident Evil 2 Remake again and again and again where I was like, okay, this isn't just like one of the best remakes, this might be one of my favorite games ever. I think they just really made a good game even better, which is rare, but when it works, it's crazy.
I think it really is like this. It depends on the game. Depends on whether you want them to do like a remake or a remaster, because, you know, for example, there's the Tumba remake that's coming out this year, I think. And like Tumba is a wonderful game that I love for the PlayStation 1, but I think the gameplay of that, I don't think I'd want them to kind of change it too much. I would just like, and to be fair, visually, that game still holds up really well. So actually, I have no idea what the hell I want that thing to be, other than just a way for people to experience it in 2023 who don't, you know, go through emulation and whatnot.
It's just quality of life stuff you probably want, right? Because I think
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I say like the THPS 1 and 2 remakes that they made it like a year or two ago that were absolutely perfect, but they added some of the quality of life features from the other THPS games, and so you were still playing the same levels, like up-res and beautiful, and you know,
the gameplay is the same
music.
Fundamentally with those.
The gameplay is the same, but they just added those little quality of life things that just made it feel better.
Like the view gaps camera is like such a, because sometimes like it says you need to grind this rail, but it's like, I don't know what fucking rail you're talking about.
Where is TC's rail? I don't know where TC's rail is, and I'm angry about it.
And I think certainly with like the Final Fantasy VII remake, and like, you know, I'm pretty sure regardless of how they did that thing, there's going to be someone along the way that's like, that's not what I wanted out of a remake.
Yes, hello, Mark. That's me, Jack Later.
I certainly didn't need them to introduce narrative ghosts. Like, for me, I'd have been happy if they had just done like the original in that isometric style look, but just obviously just made everything look prettier. Like, I didn't need them. And Final Fantasy is a weird one.
I think the whole game from Red 13's POV, so you just see like legs level of all the characters all the way through the game. You can't.
Final Fantasy is a weird one because they don't even know what they're doing with the modern games, let alone taking an old one and remastering it. So that's probably like a hard one to kind of really figure out what they wanted to do. But yeah, I do think it's just kind of game per game basis. What the original game is, does that gameplay hold up? Does that original gameplay translate to a modern audience with just a couple of tweaks to the quality of life features, again, like a Tony Hawk's? Because you can go back and play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and it might feel a little bit slow and stiff, but it's still, you know, totally just a playable game. You don't need to do much other than just make it look pretty for a modern audience. And I guess the other issue as well that you run into is, and this is kind of when I was thinking, you were talking about like Crash 4 there, and whenever you take an old IP from the 90s and release it in 2023, is like, how do you price it? Because, you know, you've got, say, like the Metal Gear Solid trilogy, and that's 50 quid or whatever. And it's like, well, there's 3 games there that are arguably some of the greatest games of all time. That's great. But then you might have like the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, and that might be like 50 quid. And it's like, wait, there's 3 games in there. That's a lot of content. But then you have Crash 4, which is just, hey, it is just another Crash game. It looks prettier. There's a lot more kind of visual effects, and it's tougher. But it is still a Crash game. And it's like, do I want to pay 50 quid for that at that point? And then that becomes really tricky. And that's one of the things with either like remasters, remakes, or games from the 90s that have like a new version. And I find that there isn't kind of a common consensus about how these things are priced, because they go from anywhere from like 20 quid to 50 or 60 quid, depending on like the publisher or the developer or whatnot. And there's just no common consensus on it. And, you know, like the Prince of Persia game that's coming out, it's like, it's a 2D Metroidvania, and they're charging 50 quid for it. And it's like, I can go play Hollow Knight, and I'm pretty sure I paid no more than about 25 quid for it at the time. And, you know, for me personally, it's one of the best Metroidvania. I mean, even like Metroid Dread, actually that was probably 50 quid as well, in fairness. Yeah. But there's just this just weird, like, I don't know, the industry as a whole hasn't kind of figured out like the best way to price these, and maybe I'm just a cheap bastard and I don't want to spend 50-60 quid on games at this point. I don't know, maybe it's just a me issue.
It's with games nowadays, the problem is we've moved into an area where there are legitimately people out there who will judge, you know, a game's value depending on how nice it looks. If something isn't a AAA, it shouldn't be charged at a AAA price. Where some people kind of value a game based on its length as well. Like if a game is the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's only 3 or 4 hours long, then, you know, we're not going to pay as much for that. And at the end of the day, that's always up to the person who's purchasing it. But it's such a complicated thing that I think a lot of people in the industry really struggle with nowadays. A game could be a complete and total failure if it doesn't come out at the right price point. Whereas I think someone like Nintendo, they can take a 2.5D Metroidvania, or like with Metroid Dread, but it's so good, people don't really worry about it. They see the reviews, they read how good this game is, and people buy it and they like it. Prince of Persia, I don't think is gonna, like, Prince of Persia is reviewing really well, and it was the kind of game where if you've seen the trailers for it, I know there was, like, I don't know if you've seen, but there was like a huge negative backlash to it when it first got shown because of how it looked. And there was more dislike.
Yeah, but those same people were like bitching about Wind Waker at the time, and you know,
exactly.
But history has shown they were on the wrong side.
But this is the market that's out there, and this is the market that's been brought up by the current state of AAA. People have these lofty expectations for video games that are completely just disjointed from maybe our experiences when we were younger. You know, we have an attachment to a certain style of game, and that sort of stuff is gaming to us. Where I think a lot of the audience nowadays, and especially when, you know, you have people like Sony trying to cultivate I guess like a not a gamer market. They're trying to get in people who like movies and TV. They're trying to treat games like this big budget experience. When people see a game like a Prince of Persia, and they're immediately thinking, this doesn't look like what I want from a game, or this doesn't look like it's worth the money. It's a completely different thing. And there's so many people out there who are like that. I don't think that's everybody, but I do think something that wasn't around when we were younger, the market of gamers, or the market of people, especially the people who spend big money on games, they're just not into that kind of thing anymore. All they know is the AAA mindset. All they know is the free to play, the Fortnites and whatnot. They might just completely disregard Prince of Persia. And I hope it doesn't. I actually think Prince of Persia will be an interesting case, because I think Nintendo can get away with making a game like Metroid Dread and charging 50 quid for it because it's good. This game might be worth that amount of money, but I don't know if people will bite on it in the same way. I think they could, ironically, Ubisoft could make one of their best games in years, completely away from their usual strategy of big open world, which is pretty much everything they do. And people will say it's amazing, and then it just might not sell anything. I hope it does, but... And
that would be so disappointing, because like that's the team that made Rayman Origins and Legends, and I love those games.
Oh,
and, you know, I wish they would have made another one of those. And like, if this doesn't sell well, and then they're like, right, well, let's smash the Far Cry 7 fucking alarm bell, and that's just
it costs too much for a game to be a failure nowadays. You back then you could make a couple of bad games in a row that didn't sell a lot. You could keep making games. Now if you mess up once, you're done. It's scary. That's why doing anything outside of the box is scarier than ever for gaming. And it makes me sad when that sort of stuff, like, especially when they're trying, because I don't want to say like a 2.5D Metroidvania is like a new thing, but they're trying some pretty bold things in regards to the combat and the exploration. And it looks like, as a Metroidvania fan, it looks really appealing to me.
Definitely. Same.
But I just hate to think that, like, because they made that conscious decision to make a game look like that, because it makes sense. You can make a really good Metroidvania in 3D, I'm sure, but that 2.5D is so, like, you can work around it so much easier when it comes to creating a game. I hope that just doesn't, like, kill it. I hope not.
Though you say that, I played there's a Batman Arkham Asylum game,
Blackgate?
not Arkham Asylum, on the PS Vita.
Yeah.
And I was always curious, like, what does a bad Metroidvania look like? And I found it, and it's that one. I've never played a Metroidvania with a map that A, didn't make any sense, and actually B, made you more confused about where you're actually trying to get to and where you've been. It's an accomplishment, I guess. But yeah, if you wanted a bad one of those, I found it recently.
I think this. I'm not sure if the 3DS one is okay. I think I heard one of them's bad and one of them's okay. That might be a
was there one on the 3DS? I didn't even know.
Yeah, so both the Metroidvania ones. There's someone introduced me to a Barbie Metroidvania a while ago. Full on DS Barbie Metroidvania. Yeah, and I was like, whoa, now we're cooking.
Is there any genre that Barbie hasn't crossed into? Like, she is actually like the gamer queen. I think she has had more video game roles than probably any other character in history. Other than maybe Mario. Like, I'd imagine Mario's probably up there as well.
I don't think, like, I mean, I've seen, they have Secret Agent Barbie. They have Detective Barbie. They have, yeah, until there's a spy thriller with Mario in it, I think we're okay.
Yeah. Or until she does a golf RPG, then.
I'd play the hell out of that.
Oh yeah, Jack.
Barbie tennis. I'm up for that.
Oh yeah,
Barbie tennis. Yeah,
Barbie, but with like a dating system and a full-on role-playing day-night cycle. Build your own house. You could fit everything into it. Barbie can do it all.
Paper Barbie,
Actually, in fairness, a Barbie Sims game probably would do gangbusters. Now I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Combine that with combine that to like House Flipper from like a modern slant.
Oh yeah, make a nice dollhouse and then flip it at the Antiques Roadshow. Oh, that would appeal to so many people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is it. We can have a whole game idea show. We can just pitch Mattel.
There we go. I think on that note, we're about 90 minutes in, or thereabouts. I think we'll leave it there for now. Sean, thank you so much for spending some quality time with us. I'm just going to put it out there. If you ever want to come back on and chat about anything, I think we would be more than happy to have you back on at any point. So, and hopefully next time you'll have actually other Irish co-hosts with us as well. Taking a well-deserved break at the moment. So, yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on. Crucially, get the plugs out there. Let people know where they can find you and your work.
Cool. I'd just like to say thanks for having me on, first of all. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to Mark and England's finest. It's been a good time. Nice to chat about random stuff. So I'm sure if you want me back on in the future, hit me up and I'll appear out of thin air when the time is right.
And we can do much more Limp Bizkit chatting next time as well.
If you want to do a whole Limp Bizkit themed episode, I'd be down for that. I've got my Rock Kid credentials. Don't worry.
I mean, genuinely, if there was a week we couldn't do, I think I could go back into the archive and edit together 90 minutes of Limp Bizkit content from our podcast.
the Limp Bizkit supercut.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, amazing.
But what if there's a Limp Bizkit centric podcast? If there isn't,
there's a podcast for everything, and if not, you know what to do.
Yeah. All right.
I feel like I would like to do a sort of postmodern examination of Fred Durst's lyrics on a podcast. I like take it really seriously.
Yeah. Fred Durst says "fuck" this many times at the beginning of Hot Dog. But what does he really mean?
Yeah.
What does he really say?
Exactly.
He then goes off to Nine Inch Nails lyrics halfway through the show. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, no.
But anyway.
But again, from a postmodern slant, I think when he was thinking of that, it was like Nietzsche that once proffered about Fred Durst. Anyway, that's just too much content. So
you don't want to give it away before the episode.
No,
that's the taster.
Exactly.
But
it's Nietzsche or Heidegger, like in German philosophy, that predicted Fred Durst and birthed him in his lyrical content, I think.
Yeah. But I should probably plug myself. If you want to check out my videos, you can find me over on YouTube at Sean Shonson. They're very long. I've heard they're good to sleep to. That's preferably how most people watch them. So put it on before you go to bed, and then I will put you to sleep in 10 minutes flat. And then when you wake up, you've got another 3 hours to go. So keep it on repeat. But thanks so much for having me on, lads. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
As mentioned, next week or the week after this podcast, we'll have Sean McGee on for our annual burial of our Game of the Year picks. If you haven't listened to it already, we have 4 episodes, about 12 hours worth of content of our Game of the Year for 2023. All of that is also up on our YouTube channel. You can watch categories individually if that works for you as well. So check out Link to the Cast on YouTube as well. As always, we are on Twitter
at Lithium Project, at Jack Lazell, at Garrett Kidney, and at Day to Dave. This is it for another installment of the Link to the Cast. Thank you very much for listening, and we shall see you again next time.